All right, next, Daniel Boone, page 31. I think you're really gonna like Daniel Boone because he basically lived outside, and you basically live outside. So, all right, Daniel Boone, 1734 to 1820. I firmly believe it requires but a little philosophy to make a man happy in whatsoever state he is. This consists in a full resignation to the will of Providence, and a resigned soul finds pleasure in a path strewed with briars and thorns. Quoted in The Discovery, Settlement, and Present State of Kentucky, John Filson, 1784. Famous frontiersman Daniel Boone shaped America through exploration and settlement. Born in Pennsylvania in 1734, Daniel learned to read and write from his mother and learned survival and hunting skills from his father. Like George Washington, Daniel played a part in the French and Indian War, but he went on to establish and defend settlements rather than pursue a political career. Still, Daniel's life was far from uneventful. Along with 5 friends, he discovered the Cumberland Gap in the Appalachian Mountains, the trail that pioneers traveled for years on their way out west. While he was developing a settlement in Kentucky, Indians kidnapped his daughter, and Daniel had to save her. Later, Daniel was kidnapped himself and escaped. Eventually, Daniel left Kentucky and took his family to West Virginia, where he served very briefly in the county legislature. Political leadership didn't suit Daniel best, though, and he and his family moved again, this time to Missouri, where he hunted and tracked for the rest of his long life. The following excerpt is from The Adventures of Daniel Boone, the Kentucky Rifleman, by F.L. Hawks, 1844, Chapter 1. Some men choose to live in crowded cities. Others are pleased with the peaceful quiet of a country farm, while some love to roam the wild forests and make their homes in the wilderness. The man of whom I shall now speak was one of this last class. Perhaps you never heard of Daniel Boone, the Kentucky Rifleman. If not, then I have a strange and interesting story to tell you. If, when a child is born, we knew that he was to become a remarkable man, the time and place of his birth would perhaps be remembered. But as this cannot be known, great mistakes are often made on these points. As to the time when Daniel Boone was born, there is no difficulty, but people have fallen into many blunders about the place. Some have said that he was born in England before his parents left that country, others that he came into the world during the passage of his parents across the Atlantic. One has told us that he was born in Virginia, another in Maryland, while many have stated that he was a native of North Carolina. These are all mistakes. Daniel Boone was born in the year 1734 in Bucks County in the state of Pennsylvania. For some cause or another, when the boy was but 3 years old, his parents moved from his house and settled upon the Schuylkill River, not far from the town. I read it wrong. The note at the bottom says it's the Schuylkill River, not far from the town of Reading. Here they lived for 10 years, and it was during this time that their son Daniel began to show his passion for hunting. He was scarcely able to carry a gun when he was shooting all the squirrels, raccoons, and even wildcats, it is said, that he could find in that region. As he grew older, his courage increased, and then we find him amusing himself with higher game. Other lads in the neighborhood were soon taught by him the use of a rifle, and were then able to join him in his adventures. On one occasion, they all started out for a hunt, and after amusing themselves till it was almost dark, were returning homeward when suddenly a wild cry was heard in the woods. The boys screamed out, "A panther! A panther!" and ran off as fast as they could. Boone stood firmly, looking around for the animal. It was a panther indeed. His eye lighted upon him just in the act of springing toward him. In an instant, he leveled his rifle and shot him through the heart. But this sort of sport was not enough for him. He seemed resolved to go away from men and live in the forests with these animals. One morning, he started off as usual with his rifle and dog. Night came on, but Daniel did not return to his home. Another day and night passed away, and still the boy did not make his appearance. His parents were now greatly alarmed. The neighbors joined them in making a search for the lad. After wandering about a great while, they at length saw smoke rising from a cabin in the distance. Upon reaching it, they found the boy. The floor of the cabin was covered with the skins of such animals as he had slain, and pieces of meat were roasting before the fire for his supper. Here, at a distance of 3 miles from any settlement, he had built his cabin of sods and branches and sheltered him in the wilderness. It was while his father was living on the headwaters of the Schuylkill that young Boone received, as far as we know, all his education. His dog and rifle were his constant companions, and day after day he started from home, only to roam through the forests. Hunting seemed to be the only business of his life, and he was never so happy as when at night he came home laden with game. He was an untiring wanderer. I do not know but that this passion for roaming was in some degree inherited by Daniel Boone. His father had already had 3 homes, one in England, one in Bucks County, and another on the Schuylkill. He now thought of removing further. It is said that the passion of Daniel for hunting was one cause which prompted his father to think of this. Land was becoming scarce, the neighborhood was a little crowded, and game less abundant, and to mend matters, he began to cast his eyes around for a new home. He was not long in choosing one. He had heard of a rich and beautiful country on the banks of the Yadkin River in North Carolina, and he determined that this should be the next resting place for him and his household. All things were made ready as soon as possible, and the journey commenced. It was a fine spring morning when the father started for his new home with his wife and children, his flocks and herds. Their journey lay hundreds of miles through a trackless wilderness, yet with cheerful and fearless hearts they pressed onward. When hungry, they feasted upon venison and wild turkeys, for Daniel with his rifle was in company. When thirsty, they found cool springs of water to refresh them by the way. When wearied at night, they laid themselves down and slept under the wide-spreading branches of the forest. At length, they reached the land they looked for, and the father found it to be all that he expected. The woods in that region were unbroken. No man seemed yet to have found them. Land was soon cleared, a cabin built, and the father in a little time found himself once more happily settled with his family. The old man with his other sons went busily to the work of making a farm. As for Daniel, they knew it was idle to expect him to help in such employment, and therefore left him to roam about with his rifle. This was a glorious country for the youth. Wild woods were all around him, and game, having not yet learned to fear the crack of a rifle, wandered fearlessly through them. This, he thought, was, of all places, the home for him. I hope you will not think that he was the idle and useless boy of the family, for it was not so. While the farm was improving, Daniel was supplying the family with provisions. The table at home was always filled with game, and they had enough and to spare. Their house became known as a warm-hearted and hospitable abode, for the wayfaring wanderer, when lost in the woods, was sure to find here a welcome, a shelter, and an abundance. Then, too, if money was wanted in the family, the peltries of the animals shot by Daniel supplied it, so that he was, in a large degree, the supporter of the household. In this way, years rolled onward, the farm still enlarging and improving, Daniel still hunting, and the home one of constant peace, happiness, and plenty. At length, the story of the success and comfort of the family brought neighbors around them. Different parts of the forest began to be cleared. Smoke was soon seen rising from new cabins, and the sharp crack of other rifles than Daniel's was sometimes heard in the morning. This grieved him sadly. Most people would have been pleased to find neighbors in the loneliness of the woods, but what pleased others did not please him. They were crowding upon him. They were driving away his game. This was his trouble. But, after all, there was one good farmer who came into the region and made his settlement, which settlement, as it turned out, proved a happy thing for Daniel. This was a very worthy man named Brian. He cleared his land, built his cabin upon a sloping hill not very far from Mr. Boone's, and before a great while, by dint of industry, had a good farm of more than 100 acres. This farm was beautifully situated. A pretty stream of water almost encircled it. On the banks of the Schuylkill, Daniel Boone found all his education, such as it was. On the banks of the Yadkin, he found something far better. I must tell you now of a very strange adventure. One evening, with another young friend, he started out upon what is called a fire hunt. Perhaps you do not know what this means. I will explain it to you. 2 people are always necessary for a fire hunt. One goes before, carrying a blazing torch of pitch pine wood, or lightwood, as it is called in the southern country, while the other follows behind with his rifle. In this way, the 2 hunters move through the forests. When an animal is startled, he will stand gazing at the light, and his eyes may be seen shining distinctly. This is called shining the eyes. The hunter with the rifle, thus seeing him, while the other shines him, levels his gun with steady aim and has a fair shot. This method of hunting is still practiced in many parts of our country and is everywhere known as a fire hunt. You can talk to your dad about that later. Boone, with his companion, started out upon a hunt and very soon reached the woods skirting the lower end of Mr. Bryan's farm. It seems they were on horseback, Boone being behind with the rifle. They had not gone far when his companion reined up his horse, and 2 eyes were seen distinctly shining. Boone leveled his rifle, but something preventing his firing. The animal darted off. Boone leaped from his horse, left his companion, and instantly dashed after it. It was too dark to see plainly. Still he pursued it. He was close upon its track, when a fence coming in the way, the animal leaped it with a clear bound. Boone climbed over as fast as he could with his rifle, but the game had got ahead. Nothing daunted by this, he pushed on until he found himself at last not very far from Mr. Bryan's home. But the animal was gone. It was a strange chase. He determined to go into Mr. Bryan's house and tell his adventure. As he drew near, the dogs raised a loud barking. The master came out, bade him welcome, and carried him into the house. Mr. Bryan had scarcely introduced him to his family as the son of his neighbor Boone, when suddenly the door of the room was burst open, and in rushed a little lad of 7, followed by a girl of 16 years old, crying out, "Oh, father, father! Sister is frightened to death. She went down to the river and was chased by a panther. The hunter and his game had met." There stood Boone, leaning upon his rifle, and Rebecca Bryan before him, gasping for breath. From that moment, he continued to pursue it. Father Bryan's house became a favorite resort for him. He loved it as well as the woods. The business was now changed. Rebecca Bryan completely shined his eyes, and after a time, to the great joy of themselves and both families, Daniel Boone and Rebecca Bryan were married. It proved, as you will see, a very happy marriage to both parties. Being now a married man, it became Daniel Boone's duty to seek a new home for himself. In a little time, therefore, he left his wife and wandered into the unsettled parts of North Carolina in search of one. After moving about for some time, he found, upon the headwaters of the Yadkin, a rich soil covered with a heavy and once more unbroken forest. Here, thought Daniel Boone, is the resting place for me. Here Rebecca Bryan and myself may be happy. This shall be our home. He returned to his wife, and she, with a cheerful heart, joined in all his plans. With tears in her eyes, she bade farewell to her friends, yet with a light spirit she started off with her husband. A clearing in the woods was soon made, a log cabin of his own soon built, and a portion of ground planted. Boone seems now to have thought he must do something more than use his rifle. He was to make a home for his wife, and busied himself accordingly in enlarging his farm as fast as he could, and in industriously cultivating it. Still, on his busiest day, he would find a leisure hour to saunter with his gun to the woods, and was sure never to return without game. His own table was loaded with it, as when at his father's, and his house, like his father's, soon became known as a warm and kind shelter for the wandering traveler. In this industrious and quiet way of farming and hunting, years were spent, and Daniel Boone was contented and happy. Several little children were now added to his group, and with his wife, his children, and his rifle for companions, he felt that all was well.